We're Bereans at the Gate. Welcome to our video blog. If you've been paying attention to our recent videos, they're a little bit shorter, dealing with one topic. We're going to continue with that theme. There have been some interesting changes that have been speculated as it relates to our recent tax differences that we're seeing emerge. So Jeff, maybe some demographic shifts are taking place. Why don't you lead us into the discussion?
Well, part of, there's always been maybe not always, but certainly over the last many years, those high tax states have had a net out-migration, the Northeast specifically. There could be other reasons, but what it's worked towards has been the high tax states tend to lose population towards the lower tax states, specifically the South, and usually often less regulated as well. We've seen that with manufacturing and other things. But the point, there was a journal article in the last few days highlighting a recent American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, study on rich states, poor states, that they expect that the demographic swing is going to widen considerably because of the Trump tax cut, which mandates that the taxes that you can deduct off of your federal tax are at like $10,000. So the thing that I want to talk about, I think this is really interesting. What happens, we've got all this cultural pressure and conflict. What we see is these blue areas of the country, and then we see these red areas of the country. This suggests that the blue areas are going to get a little less blue or a little smaller blue, and they're going to come into the red areas. And what's going to emerge? And I don't know. I'm just throw it out there. Is Texas going to be kind of blue not because of a change in people that are there changing, but because of people deciding to come in? I mean, Austin's already blue, so I just throw it out there. It's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunity. What do you guys think about that?
A couple of things come to mind. I mean, first of all, we've seen something similar to this in Southern politics, where we saw once air conditioning came onto the scene in the South, once the South started to get a little bit more competitive politically, you started to see some migration of Northerners to the South for economic reasons and other things, and they frequently brought republicanism with them. And so it went from being a one-party region to being a competitive region to now being a fairly Republican region. I think two things happened. One is they made the region a little bit more Republican. They also helped convert some of the Democrats who were there into their way of thinking. I'm not sure, though, that we have a lot of evidence of the people who are there converting them into being Democrats. You know what I mean? So will they bring liberalism into these areas? Will they be influenced by the context? Chances are they would bring liberalism from places like New York, California, and other places like you suggest, and make them more competitive states. So a place like Texas is already kind of trending in a direction that makes it very competitive. What about Georgia? Georgia's also getting a little bit more competitive, of course, across the state.
North Carolina.
North Carolina, Virginia has already sort of tilted in that direction. So it's an interesting discussion. I think there's a good chance of it.
I'd like to ask Mark and Mark one of you guys this question. So we're talking about probably the upper 10% in the income based on the figures, Jeff, that you mentioned when we were talking about that. Is there any correlation between political affiliation and income at that level?
It used to be a stronger correlation between income and conservatism and income and Republican identity. That's declined a little bit to the point now where it isn't quite as distinguishable at that income level.
So it's more likely that someone from New York would tend to be very blue as opposed to...
That's the higher likelihood, I think. You also have to ask, so what kind of person is most likely to pick up and leave? Is that a certain kind of mentality that maybe is more conducive to a red mindset? I don't know. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. Mark, what do you think?
Out the West Coast, for example, you think about California. There are people moving from there to Idaho and Montana. Montana's becoming a little purpler now than it used to be.
Right.
And I've heard from my daughter who spent a summer out there what's actually going on out there. Property values were lower, taxes were lower, general policy was more conservative, in fact, even more libertarian in some cases. It's changing because of those people coming from California. Not necessarily the highest income groups in every case. Though I would say, from what I've read about it, they tend to be higher income.
It's also possible that some of those states, like California and New York, will just get bluer. You know, it could be that if you see some of the red people leaving and going to the red states, maybe it's just more decidedly, overwhelmingly, homogeneously progressive at that point in a place like California.
Well, here's the interesting thing that
Yeah.
was curious about.
Yeah.
Well, we've got such a conflict in our society right now, and it's really easy for California, the very bluish areas,
Yep.
to think monolithically in the same way with the red.
Yep.
When we have this new, let's assume that there is
Let's
a
hope,
lot
yeah,
more.
let's say, yep.
What's that going to do to? Will that make us get along better? We're living next door. There's a flaming liberal, flaming
great
conservative here.
question.
Will we get
It's a
along
great-
better, or what? Or will it
That's a
just
great
make
question.
the hatred be now? I'm throwing fire bombs at my next door neighbor. I mean, what's it going to be there?
Anecdotally, I don't see let's all get along scenario. North Carolina has had a lot of conflict in recent years. A lot of people have been moving south to North Carolina. That's sort of one of those tier states in the south.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing things get more harmonious there. Montana, I've heard bad stories about too. A bit of conflict going on there between the people who were there, who wanted things to stay the same, conservative, low cost of living, low prices, all that kind of thing. The new people coming in, they don't like these new people. So there's a lot more conflict.
One of the questions you have to ask too is where does the interaction take place? All right, so okay, you move to a neighborhood. That's fair. You could think your neighbors now all of a sudden are different thinking. Do you go to the same church? Kids go to the same schools, shop in the same stores, watch the same movies. If the answers to those questions are no, then where exactly would this social interaction take place to the point where you'd see conversion? I mean, you remember Charles Murray's book, Coming Apart, suggests that these two cultures are living in different realities to the extent that they just don't enmesh all that much, which could be what we'd see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's
It'll give us an
interesting
interesting
to
thing to study over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Or anyone who wants to write a doctoral dissertation, sounds like a great topic. Get on board, start collecting data.
Either that or Hegel. You got it made.
That or Hegel. Oh my gosh. It's the most inappropriate comments ever been uttered on our video blog. So thank you for joining us.